welcome to our 4th Facebook Live event. We're so excited to have you here today. If you're tuning in, great. Feel free to drop any questions or comments you have in the comment section. If you are watching it after the Facebook Live event, please also feel free to drop any questions, comments, thoughts at any time. We love to hear from you. So for today, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and then we'll start talking about some of our questions that we have related to this recipe. But for today, we're kind of going with a spring sort of thought process, starting to lighten up some of our meals. Super beneficial, of course, to include as many fruits and vegetables as possible, but it seems like as the weather starts to get warmer, it's also a really good time to naturally just add some of those lighter foods into the diet. Something else that we're going to touch on today is a plant-based recipe. This means that our protein today is going to come from a plant-based source called Tempeh, which we'll explain in a little bit exactly what Tempeh is. But also this recipe is going to include a lot of fiber. So the two reasons we're going to include it is number one, we're getting some really good plant-based protein, and number two, fiber. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right, so what we have here, we're going to make an Asian style tempeh lettuce wrap. So we got a lot of fiber in there, like I said, coming from the vegetables as well as the plant-based protein. Plant-based diet is really important to me for two reasons. Number one, like I said, vegetables are going to be a very healing food. The more we add to the diet, the better the digestion is. That fiber is also going to be really good for your gut bacteria. Now, something to think about before starting to add a lot of vegetables and fiber to the diet is that if this isn't something that you would typically have, a lot of fiber in one meal, you might want to start a little bit slow. Something that can often happen is if you start to add fiber really quickly, you might feel some bloating or maybe some GI discomfort. So if you find that happening, pull it back a little bit and slowly start to add in that fiber. So just a thought. Second, plant-based eating is also really important to me personally because it's good for the environment. Reducing the amount of animal products in our diet is going to be good for the environment, and we want to take care of our planet. So like I said, we're making an Asian style lettuce wrap, and to make this, first we are going to start by sauteing some onions and peppers. So I've already started to chop them up. Oil is heated. I have about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Gonna add our onions and peppers, and then we'll finish chopping the rest of this. So tempeh, if you've heard of it before, you might be familiar with what it looks like, but maybe not as familiar of how it's made or what is actually in tempeh. So tempeh is a fermented soybean that is then formed together with some grains, sometimes different nuts and seeds, and during the fermentation process, it forms almost like a sturdy block, maybe kind of similar to what tofu would look like. It's going to come in a block. You can find it typically in the produce section of the grocery store. Has a very nutty flavor and is maybe a little bit of an acquired taste, but sauteing it with some of your favorite ingredients, like for me, for example, onions and peppers, is a really great way to introduce a different flavor. Turned our heat off there, a little bit too low. So I have the medium, or I have the heat on about medium heat. This is to get the onions and peppers nice and soft, maybe some of that golden brown, start to caramelize the onions as well, which always adds a nice sweet flavor. There we go. So I'll give you an idea of what tempeh looks like. I've already started to crumble up some of the tempeh because it is going to mix really perfectly with the onions and peppers if it's a similar size. We want them all to cook at the same rate. So this is what a piece of tempeh looks like. I've already cut it a little bit, so it doesn't come in strips like this. Sometimes you can find it flavored, but this is what it's going to look like. As you can see, some of the soybeans and the grains within the tempeh. So like I said, it's fermented. So not only is it a great source of protein and fiber, but it's fermented. So what that means is that they are going to form it together, and then the bacteria is going to be introduced to the soybeans and to the grains and start to ferment it down a little bit further. That means that it's going to be a probiotic containing food. So you have your fiber and you have some beneficial bacteria wrapped up into one plant-based protein. So we're going to go ahead and add our tempeh and let that cook. something really exciting as well about this recipe is that we are going to show you how to get a lot of protein from plant-based foods. Often it's a really easy go-to to add animal-based protein to your diet, whether that's chicken or ground turkey, which can also be substituted out for the tempeh if tempeh or even tofu or lentils isn't something that you prefer and you want to go with an animal-based protein, that is okay. But this meal, we are going to hit about 35 to 40 grams of protein, all from vegetables and grains and soybeans, which is a vegetable bean, I guess you could say. Turn up the heat a little bit, get that cooking. Okay, great. All right, still have that at about medium heat. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to start to put together the sauce. It's going to kind of give it that Asian flair. So to make the sauce, we're including an ingredient called miso. Once again, fermented. So it's going to add a little bit of that extra healthy bacteria to the meal on top of the fiber. So just all around a super gut healthy meal. So in this little ramekin, already measured it out, we have the miso paste, some garlic and sesame oil. Go ahead and add that in. And then we are also going to add some fresh lime juice to really freshen up the recipe. And even some lime zest. The variable ingredient in this sauce is going to be red pepper flakes. If you like a little bit of heat, you can go ahead and add a full tablespoon. But if you prefer it maybe a little bit less heat, you can completely omit it altogether, or you can just add a small amount. So we're going to add a little bit to ours today. I think it kind of adds a nice dynamic flavor to the meal altogether. So because we're talking about plant-based recipe and just how important it is to include plant-based protein in the diet every so often, I think that with a lot of the diet trends and the things that you can find on your Pinterest feed or even on Instagram, it's hard to decide, is a plant-based diet or a vegetarian or vegan diet the best diet to follow? Or is maybe a paleo diet, which is going to include a lot of animal protein and animal products in the diet, the best diet? And I'm going to debunk all of that right now and say there's really no such best thing. If you're eating a varied diet and you're able to hit all of your goals for both your macronutrients being protein, carbohydrate, and fat, but then you're also getting a variety of nutrients from your fruits and vegetables and whole grains, vitamins and minerals, then that's okay. Whatever feels best to your body is going to be the right diet for you. So try not to get caught up in the latest trends or maybe what you're hearing about most often. Really, ultimately, it's going to come down to your own body and what feels good for you. So don't ever feel persuaded towards one or the other. Find what's important to you and what feels best and go off of that. I promise it's always the best approach. Okay, as this continues to cook, our onions and peppers are starting to soften, which is another really kind of good thing to note, that if you're including a lot of fruits and vegetables and you haven't typically included them, cooking them is going to be also an easier way for your body to break them down. You might not have nearly as much kind of bloating and things like that because you're going to kind of cook it down and help break up some of those fibers. Okay, as this cooks, I'm going to add our sauce. It's going to help caramelize some of that, and because there is raw garlic in this recipe, I like to add the garlic, let it cook and kind of sweeten up so you're not getting that spicy garlic kind of flavor in your lettuce wrap. Alright, this smells so good. We didn't add any soy sauce to this recipe. Soy is going to be an ingredient that contains a lot of sodium. So not always a healthy addition to the diet, depending on what other foods you've included throughout the day. But if it is something that you would want to use as a topper or even add to this dish, you could. I'm going to give you an alternative that some of you might have heard of. It's called liquid aminos, and it's hidden here by our edamame, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And liquid aminos, you should be able to find it at a lot of a variety of grocery stores, maybe in the natural food section. But the liquid aminos is going to be a little bit lower in sodium. Let's see, the sodium count on this is 300 milligrams versus maybe a typical sodium or a soy sauce would have up to 1,500 milligrams. And then it's also going to be a little bit lower in sugar, and it's actually made with coconut and has a little bit of water and then added salt. So just a flavor that's not going to be quite as sodium dense as soy sauce, but something to consider. I thought that that would be fitting for this video. Okay, so this is coming together nicely. It's once again one of those one-pan meals, so it cleans up really easily. All right, we're just about there. Gonna add a small amount of red pepper flakes. Once again, this is totally optional. If you don't like things spicy, then you can absolutely skip this. And this is a lettuce wrap, so what we've done is we've switched out what would typically be maybe a corn tortilla or a flour tortilla with a lettuce wrap, and that's going to lighten up this meal. Like we said in the beginning, spring is here, so we're going to start to lighten up our meals, go for maybe something a little bit more vegetable-based, and this is kind of a good switch up. I think that if you try this recipe, you'll find you really enjoy it. This recipe is featured on our recipe library. We're going to drop a link in the comments, not only for the recipe for this meal, but also for an article that we wrote that's going to showcase our recipe library. We're really excited about it. We have about 50 recipes, all tailored towards different areas of health. If you are an Ixcela member, as a perk, you get to access this really cool recipe library that has a lot of different filters and different ways for you to really customize it to your needs, whether it's a dietary preference, the type of meal that you're looking for, an entree versus maybe a breakfast or a snack. And then also it will really help you hone in on some of the recipes and the foods that are going to help you boost that score that you might be lowest in. So our tempeh is done cooking. I'm gonna go ahead and plate this up. Some other additions to this recipe could be some fresh grated ginger. We've already added the garlic. Some ginger, you could add carrots to this recipe, you could add some lentils. You really can get creative here. And like I said, if the plant-based proteins aren't something that you prefer, you can also use a ground turkey or a chicken as well. So we're gonna go ahead and start plating this. And probably the portion of this video that I'm most excited to share with you is how we are going to turn this plant-based recipe into a meal that has about 35 grams of protein, which is really exciting. So we're gonna have 2 lettuce wraps with this meal. So right here I have my romaine. Try to find romaine that is intact. If it has holes in it, it kind of defeats the purpose of this being the wrap or the vehicle to get it into your mouth. So look for romaine leaves that are intact and really sturdy, because that's gonna help you actually utilize it as a wrap. So we're probably taking about 3/4 of a cup of the tempeh mixture. I'm gonna arrange it into the romaine. Ooh, pan's hot. Okay, perfect. And then something that I like to top it with, set this up so we can make it look really nice, is a little bit of sesame seeds. I also found this blend of sesame seeds, poppy seeds, and garlic that I thought would be pretty as well, so we're going to use that today. The recipe calls for sesame seeds, but we're going to switch it up. Have fun in the kitchen. Let yourself explore and use some of the ingredients that maybe have been in your pantry for a few months. Finally, we're going to add some more color and some more fiber with some shredded cabbage. Like so. I will say the disclaimer, you might need a fork on the side as you're enjoying this meal because it will fall apart a little bit, but that's okay. And then finally, have some cilantro here. I'm gonna top it with some cilantro. We could also use the rest of our lime wedge to add as a little garnish as well. Okay, so this meal right here with just the lettuce wraps is going to be about 25 grams of protein. And look at that, it just looks light and fresh, so beautiful. So I'm gonna go ahead and clear some of this stuff up. And we're gonna move on to how you can turn this meal into a meal that contains about 35 grams of protein. So right here on our plate, you can see it just looks really pretty. We're going to then add 2 more components to this meal, and then we'll give you a really good visual of what exactly it looks like. So first, right here, probably one of my favorite appetizers at a sushi restaurant is going to be edamame. This is really easy to find. It's in the frozen section of the supermarket. We're gonna add, let's see, we'll refer to the nutrition label to make sure we're right on the money. So just a half a cup of the edamame, and that's just the edible parts. So we'll probably add about 3/4 a cup to a plate. Has 10 grams of protein. So just by adding the edamame, you're only adding about 100 more calories and 10 grams of protein, which is really great. And here we are, we're gonna add this to the plate. That's gonna make us hit 35 grams of protein. And then I wanna show you 2 other options as well that you could add to this meal that would really round it out. We have the edamame on the plate cold, but you could also steam it, blanch it in some hot water, and then pull it out to heat it up if you'd like. You could also top it with some more seasoning. Maybe you like the red pepper flake. This one in particular already has a little bit of salt on it, so I wouldn't recommend adding any more salt. So this plate right here has 35 grams of protein. Another option, we have 2 other options. You could add quinoa, which will add about 7 to 9 grams. This is a blend that also has brown rice, so this one has 7 grams of protein per serving. And then finally, another addition would be about 1/4 cup of lentils. Lentils are a little bit easier on the gut versus like a kidney bean or a bigger bean. But once again, if you start to notice some bloating from lentils, but you really want to include them in the diet, start a little bit smaller, maybe have a smaller serving and then build it up. But a serving of lentils has between 10 and 12 grams of protein as well, so that's really exciting. You can get a plant-based meal with a lot of fiber, a lot of protein that's just going to be good for the gut all around. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what this meal looks like. Clean up our space a little bit here. Here we go. That is just beautiful.